The clock on the wall showed 5:47 p.m. when Lisa pushed through the heavy glass doors of Romano's Italian restaurant. She was 13 minutes early, like always. Being late wasn't something she could afford, not when this job was the only thing keeping the lights on at home. She tied her apron around her waist, the familiar weight of the order pad settling into the front pocket. The restaurant was already starting to fill up with the early dinner crowd. Friday nights were always like this, a steady stream of families, couples on date nights, and groups of friends looking to unwind after a long week. "Table 7 needs water," called out Tony, the owner, from behind the bar. He was a good man, Tony. A bit gruff around the edges, but he'd given Lisa this job 3 years ago when she desperately needed it, no questions asked. That kind of kindness wasn't something she'd forget. Lisa grabbed a pitcher and made her way to table 7. An older couple sat there, studying the menu with the kind of concentration that suggested they'd been married long enough to take their time with decisions. She filled their glasses, offered a warm smile, and moved on to the next table. This was her life now. Refilling drinks, taking orders, carrying plates of pasta and pizza from the kitchen to hungry customers, wiping down tables, counting tips at the end of the night. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work and it paid the bills. Most of them, anyway. Her eyes drifted, as they often did during quiet moments, to the corner of the restaurant. There, pushed against the wall between the restrooms and the emergency exit, sat an old upright piano. The wood was scratched and faded, the bench cushion worn thin from decades of use. A thin layer of dust covered the top, and someone had placed a fake plant on it that hadn't been dusted in weeks. Nobody played it anymore. Most nights Tony would just set his phone on top and play music through a small speaker. Classical stuff, mostly. Italian opera. Sometimes Frank Sinatra. It added atmosphere, he said, made the place feel more authentic. But Lisa knew that piano. She knew its voice even though it had been silent for months. She knew which keys stuck slightly, which ones rang out bright and clear, which ones had a mellower, deeper tone. She knew it better than most people in this restaurant would ever guess. 10 years ago, that piano would have been the center of her entire world. Back then, her days were filled with scales and arpeggios, with Chopin and Beethoven, with sight-reading exercises and music theory. She'd spent 6 hours a day at a much finer piano than this one, her fingers flying across the keys, her whole body swaying with the music. The conservatory had been her dream, not just attending but graduating, becoming a concert pianist, performing in halls where the acoustics were perfect and the audiences actually understood the complexity of what they were hearing. She'd been good too. Really good. Good enough that her instructors had talked about competitions and scholarships and a future that seemed bright and certain. Then her father got sick. It started small. Fatigue, some confusion, memory problems that everyone dismissed as normal aging. By the time the doctors figured out what was really going on, the disease had already taken root. Someone needed to be home with him. Someone needed to manage the medications, the appointments, the daily routines that kept him safe and comfortable. Her mother tried to do it alone at first, but the stress broke her down. Lisa watched her mother age 5 years in 6 months. The choice became obvious, even if it hurt like nothing else ever had. She withdrew from the conservatory 2 months into her second year. That was 8 years ago. Her father passed away 4 years later, but by then, the door to her old life had closed. The money was gone. Her skills had dulled. The connections she'd made had moved on. And her mother, exhausted from years of caregiving, had developed health problems of her own. Different problems than her father, but problems that still needed attention, still needed care, still needed someone to be there. So Lisa was there, every morning, every night, and during every shift at Romano's Italian restaurant. "Lisa, table 12 is ready to order," called Jenny, the other waitress on shift tonight. Jenny was 19, working her way through community college. She was a sweet kid, always humming pop songs while she worked, always checking her phone between orders. Lisa walked over to table 12, pulling out her pad. A family of 4. The kids were arguing about whether to get spaghetti or pizza. The parents looked tired but happy. She took their order with practiced efficiency, making sure to write down that one kid wanted no mushrooms and the other wanted extra cheese. As she walked back to the kitchen to hand in the order, she passed the piano again. Her fingers twitched involuntarily, muscle memory stirring after years of dormancy. She could almost feel the keys beneath her hands, could almost hear the music that used to pour out of her like breathing. But that was another life. This was her life now, and there was nothing wrong with it. She was helping her mother. She was paying bills. She was surviving. That had to be enough. The dinner rush hit hard around 6:30. The restaurant filled completely, every table occupied, the noise level rising to that pleasant hum of conversation and clinking silverware that meant good business. Lisa moved between tables like a dancer, her movements efficient and graceful even after hours on her feet. She'd learned to find small satisfactions in the work. The smile from a regular customer, the generous tip from a businessman celebrating something, the thank you from a parent whose messy toddler she'd been patient with. These moments didn't fill the hollow space inside her where music used to live, but they helped. They reminded her that this work mattered too in its own way. Around 7:15, she delivered a large order to table 9, 3 pasta dishes, 2 pizzas, and a salad. As she set down the plates, she heard Tony's phone music system acting up again. The speaker crackled and went silent, cutting off mid-song. Tony cursed under his breath in Italian, tapping his phone screen with increasing frustration. The restaurant suddenly felt quieter without the background music, the absence noticeable even under the steady buzz of conversation. Lisa continued working, moving from table to table, but she felt it. That pull, that familiar ache in her chest that the silent piano always triggered. It sat there in the corner like a ghost of everything she used to be, everything she'd given up. She pushed the feeling down, like always. There was work to do. There were bills to pay. There was her mother waiting at home, needing her. The music could wait. It had been waiting for 8 years already. What was one more night? The dinner rush was finally starting to ease up around 8 o'clock when the couple walked in. Lisa noticed them immediately, not because they looked unusual, but because of the way the elderly man held the door for his wife, the gentle way he guided her to their table with his hand on her back. After years of watching people, you learned to recognize real affection when you saw it. Tony seated them at table 15, one of the better spots near the window. Lisa grabbed 2 menus and headed over, water pitcher in hand. "Good evening," she said, setting down the glasses. "Can I start you off with something to drink besides water?" The man smiled warmly. He had kind eyes, the sort that crinkled at the corners from a lifetime of smiling. "Just water is fine for now, thank you. We're celebrating tonight, so we'll take our time looking at the menu." "Anniversary?" Lisa asked, pouring the water. "Birthday," the woman said, her voice soft but happy. 72 years old today." "Well, happy birthday," Lisa said genuinely. "I'll give you folks a few minutes to look over the menu. Let me know if you have any questions." She moved away to check on her other tables, but she kept an eye on the couple. There was something sweet about them. The way they leaned in close to share the menu. The way they seemed perfectly comfortable in each other's silence. 20 minutes later, she took their order, chicken piccata for him, seafood pasta for her, and brought them the complimentary bread basket that Tony always offered to celebrating customers. The restaurant had settled into its late evening rhythm, quieter now. Most of the families with young children already gone home. Tony was still fiddling with his phone and speaker, trying to get the music working again. He'd moved on from Italian opera to some instrumental jazz, but the speaker kept cutting out every few minutes. Each time it happened, he'd mutter something under his breath and restart it. Lisa was clearing table 8 when she heard the elderly man call out, "Excuse me, Tony?" Tony looked up from his eternal battle with technology. "Yes, sir?" "Something wrong with your meal?" "Oh no, the food is wonderful," the man said. "I was just wondering, that piano in the corner. Does anyone ever play it?" Tony glanced at the dusty instrument and shook his head. "Not anymore. Used to have a guy come in on Saturday nights years ago, but he moved away. Now it's just decoration, really. I keep meaning to have it tuned, but..." He shrugged in that universal gesture that meant life gets busy and some things fall by the wayside. "Shame," the man said. "My wife always loved live piano music. I was hoping someone might play Happy Birthday for her." Tony looked genuinely apologetic. "I'm sorry, friend. I would if I could, but I never learned. Can't even play chopsticks." He held up his phone. "Best I can do is find a recording." "That's all right," the man said. But Lisa could see the small disappointment in his wife's face, quickly hidden behind a smile. Lisa stood frozen near table 8, her hands gripping the dirty plates she'd been clearing. Her heart had started beating faster the moment she heard the word piano. Now it was hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She could do it. She could walk over there right now, sit down at that bench and play Happy Birthday. It was a simple song. Even with rusty skills, she could manage that much. But the thought of sitting at a piano again, even for something as simple as Happy Birthday, terrified her in a way she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't fear of playing badly, though that was part of it. It was something deeper, opening a door she'd worked so hard to keep closed, letting herself feel things she'd buried under 8 years of practical survival. She carried the dirty dishes back to the kitchen, her mind racing. Through the service window, she could see the couple at table 15. They were holding hands across the table now, talking quietly. The woman laughed at something her husband said, and the sound was pure and joyful. Jenny bounced into the kitchen behind her. "Did you hear that?" Someone asked about the piano. "I was thinking maybe we could pull up a video on the TV screen or something. You know, make it special for her birthday." "That's a nice idea," Lisa said, but her voice sounded strange to her own ears. She loaded the dishes into the washing station, her hands moving on autopilot. Her fingers trembled slightly. She pressed them flat against the cool stainless steel counter, trying to steady herself. When was the last time she'd even touched a piano? 2 years ago? 3? There was one at the community center near her apartment. Sometimes, when her mother was having a good day and Lisa had a rare afternoon off, she'd walk past it. Once or twice, she'd let her fingers brush across the keys, but she'd never actually played. Never let herself go there. What if she'd forgotten everything? What if her fingers didn't remember? What if 8 years of serving pasta and pouring drinks had erased the part of her that used to make music? But what if they hadn't? Lisa took a deep breath and walked back out into the dining room. The couple's entrees had just come up. She delivered them with her usual efficiency, making sure they had everything they needed. They thanked her warmly, and she found herself lingering an extra moment at their table. "The piano," she heard herself say. The words came out before she could stop them. I used to play, a long time ago." The man's face lit up. "Really, would you?" "We wouldn't want to impose, but it would make her night truly special." Lisa's mouth went dry. What was she doing? "I'm not very good anymore," she said quickly. "And I don't know if it's even in tune. It hasn't been played in months." "Doesn't matter," the woman said, speaking up for the first time since ordering. Her eyes were bright with hope. "Any music is beautiful when it comes from the heart." Tony had appeared beside her. "Lisa, you play piano. In 3 years you never mentioned this." She felt her cheeks flush. "It was a long time ago. I'm really rusty." "Hey, if you want to try, go ahead," Tony said. "The speaker's been acting up all night anyway. Live music would be great. Just, nothing too complicated. Keep it appropriate for the restaurant." Lisa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her legs felt shaky as she walked toward the corner of the restaurant. The piano seemed larger somehow, more imposing than it ever had when she'd simply been walking past it. She pulled out the bench, and dust motes danced in the air. The cushion compressed under her weight as she sat down, and suddenly she was 19 again, sitting at the conservatory, her whole life ahead of her. Her hands hovered over the keys. They were cool under her fingertips, smooth and familiar and terrifying all at once. She pressed down gently on middle C. The note rang out, slightly flat but not terrible. She tried a few more keys. The piano definitely needed tuning, but it was playable. The restaurant had gone quieter. People were watching her now, curious about what was happening in the corner. Lisa felt their attention like a physical weight. Just happy birthday, she told herself. That's all. Simple and quick. Then you can go back to work and forget this ever happened. She positioned her hands over the keys, took a breath, and began to play. The melody of Happy Birthday emerged, simple and gentle. Her fingers moved carefully, remembering the pattern. It was basic, nothing special, just the tune everyone knew. But as she played, something strange happened. Her hands relaxed. The tension in her shoulders eased. And without quite meaning to, she began to add small embellishments, a little run between phrases, a subtle harmony in the left hand. Her fingers remembered things her mind had forgotten. By the time she reached the final note, she'd added a gentle flourish that made the simple tune sound almost elegant. The restaurant broke into warm applause. The birthday woman was beaming, her eyes glistening with tears. Lisa started to stand, ready to retreat back to safety, but her hands didn't want to leave the keys. Before she quite realized what she was doing, she began to play something else. Not Happy Birthday. Something she'd written herself years ago in a practice room at the conservatory. A piece she'd never performed for anyone, never finished, never thought she'd play again. Her fingers moved across the keys with growing confidence, and the music began to fill the restaurant with something nobody there had expected. The music started softly, almost like a whisper. Lisa's fingers moved carefully at first, finding their way through a melody she'd written in a cramped practice room 8 years ago. She'd called it Morning Light back then, though she'd never written down the name anywhere official. It was just something that existed in her head and her hands. The piece began with a simple pattern in the right hand, gentle and searching, like the first rays of sun touching a window. Her left hand added a quiet foundation, steady and sure. She'd written it during a particularly difficult week at the conservatory, when everything felt overwhelming and she wasn't sure she was good enough to be there. Strange how she remembered it now. Every note, every phrase like it had been waiting all these years for her to come back. Around her, the restaurant had gone completely silent. The conversation at table 3 stopped mid-sentence. The couple at table 9, who'd been debating whether to order dessert, sat frozen with their menus in hand. Even the kitchen went quiet. Through the service window, Lisa could see the cook and dishwasher standing still, listening. But Lisa wasn't thinking about any of them anymore. Her eyes had closed somewhere around the third measure, and now she was somewhere else entirely. She was back in that practice room with the afternoon light slanting through dusty windows. She was 20 years old again and everything was still possible. Her fingers gained confidence. The melody grew, expanding into something richer. She'd always loved this middle section, where the left hand took over the main theme while the right hand danced around it with cascading runs. It was technically challenging, requiring both hands to work independently while still creating something unified and beautiful. She stumbled slightly on a chord change, her fingers not quite as nimble as they used to be, but instead of stopping, instead of letting embarrassment freeze her, she pushed through. The stumble became part of the music somehow, a small hesitation that made the next phrase sound even more determined. The piece built gradually, layer by layer. What had started as something quiet and introspective began to swell with emotion. This was the part she'd written after getting a letter from her father, back when he was first getting sick. He'd told her how proud he was of her, how he loved hearing her play even though he didn't understand all the technical complexity. He'd said music was proof that humans could create beauty out of thin air, and that she had a gift for making that beauty real. She'd cried while writing this section. She was almost crying now, playing it. Her hands moved faster, more urgently. The melody twisted and turned, asking questions, searching for answers. The piano rang out, filling every corner of the restaurant. Some of the notes were slightly out of tune, giving the music a raw, imperfect quality that somehow made it more honest. At table 15, the birthday woman had tears running down her cheeks. Her husband held her hand tightly, his own eyes glistening. At table 7, a businessman who'd been typing emails on his phone had set it down completely, his attention captured. Jenny stood near the kitchen door, her mouth slightly open in shock. Tony had moved from behind the bar to stand where he could see Lisa clearly. In 3 years of working for him, she'd never mentioned this, never hinted that she could create something like this. He'd thought he knew her. Reliable Lisa, quiet Lisa, the one who showed up on time and never complained. Now he was seeing someone entirely different, and he didn't quite know what to make of it. The music reached its climax, both hands working together in a powerful cascade of notes that seemed to pour out of the piano like water. This was the part that had always scared Lisa when she was at the conservatory. It required complete commitment, no holding back, no safety net. You had to throw yourself into it fully or not at all. She threw herself into it. Her whole body moved with the music now, swaying slightly, her shoulders rising and falling. Her fingers flew across the keys with a speed and precision that came from thousands of hours of practice. Hours that her muscles still remembered even if her conscious mind had tried to forget. And then gradually the storm began to calm. The music softened, the urgency fading into something gentler. The melody from the beginning returned but changed now, transformed by everything that had come before. It was the same notes, but they meant something different. They spoke of acceptance, of finding peace with difficult choices, of moving forward even when the path wasn't the one you'd planned. Lisa's fingers slowed, drawing out the final phrases. The melody wound down like someone taking a deep, settling breath after a long cry. The last notes hung in the air, and she let them fade naturally, not rushing, letting the piano's old strings vibrate until they went silent on their own. For a long moment, nothing happened. The restaurant stayed frozen in absolute silence. Then someone started clapping. It was the elderly husband at table 15, standing up, applauding with his hands raised high. His wife joined him immediately, then the couple at table 9, then the businessman at table 7. Within seconds, everyone in the restaurant was on their feet. The applause was thunderous, echoing off the walls, punctuated by whistles and shouts of "Bravo!" Lisa opened her eyes and reality crashed back in like a wave. She looked around at all the people standing, all the attention focused on her, and felt her face go hot with embarrassment. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to play Happy Birthday and go back to work. She was supposed to stay invisible, stay safe, stay in the life she'd built for herself. She stood up quickly from the piano bench, nearly knocking it over in her haste. Her hands were shaking now, but not from the playing, from the overwhelming rush of emotions she didn't know how to handle. "I'm sorry," she said, though nobody could hear her over the applause. "I didn't mean to. I should get back to work." But people were approaching her now. The birthday woman reached her first, taking both of Lisa's hands in her own. The older woman's hands were soft and warm, and she held on like Lisa was something precious. "That was the most beautiful birthday gift anyone has ever given me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. Thank you so much. You're welcome," Lisa managed to say, overwhelmed. Other customers were gathering around now, all trying to talk to her at once. Where did she learn to play like that? How long had she been studying? Why was she working as a waitress when she had talent like this? Did she perform anywhere else? Did she give lessons? The questions came too fast, overlapping, making her head spin. She tried to answer, tried to be polite, but she felt like she was drowning. This was too much. Too much attention, too much emotion, too much of everything she'd been trying to avoid for 8 years. Okay, give her some space," Tony said, pushing through the small crowd. He put a protective hand on Lisa's shoulder. "Lisa, take 5. Go get some air. I've got the tables." She nodded gratefully and made her way toward the back door, past the restrooms, past the storage area. She pushed through the emergency exit into the alley behind the restaurant and took a huge gulp of the cool night air. Her heart was racing. Her hands were still trembling. She leaned against the brick wall and closed her eyes, trying to calm down, trying to process what had just happened. She'd played. After 8 years of silence, she'd actually played. And it had felt amazing. Terrifying and wonderful, and like coming home to a place she'd thought was lost forever. But it also felt dangerous, because now that door was open again, and she didn't know if she could close it. She didn't know if she wanted to. Inside, she could still hear the buzz of excited conversation, the energy she'd created. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, then buzzed again, and again. What was happening? She pulled it out and saw notifications flooding in. Text messages, social media tags. Her phone kept buzzing, barely pausing between alerts. Someone had recorded her performance. And from the looks of it, they'd already posted it online. Lisa stared at her phone screen, watching the numbers climb. 200 views. 500. 1,000? The video had been posted less than 20 minutes ago, and it was spreading faster than she could comprehend. Someone had captured the entire performance from start to finish. The angle was good too. You could see her hands on the keys, see her face, see the emotion in every movement. The person had captioned it simply, "Waitress at local restaurant reveals hidden talent." Wait for it, the comments were already pouring in. This gave me chills, and who is she? Someone needs to sign her immediately. I've been playing piano for 15 years and can't play like this. Incredible. The way she closes her eyes and just feels the music. Pure talent. Lisa's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. She leaned harder against the brick wall, trying to steady herself. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The back door opened and Jenny stuck her head out. "Lisa, you okay? Everyone's asking about you." She saw Lisa's face and came all the way out, letting the door close behind her. "Hey, what's wrong? That was amazing in there. Why do you look like you're about to throw up?" Lisa held up her phone, showing her the video. Jenny's eyes went wide. Oh my God, it's already got 1,500 views. Lisa, this is incredible. You're going viral. This isn't incredible, Lisa said, her voice tight. I didn't want this. I just wanted to play Happy Birthday for a nice old lady. I didn't ask to be recorded. I didn't ask for any of this. Jenny looked confused. And why not? You're crazy talented. People should know about this. This could change everything for you. I don't want everything to change, Lisa said. But even as the words came out, she wasn't sure if they were true. Her phone buzzed again. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Hi, I was at Romano's tonight. I work for the Community Arts Center downtown. Would love to talk to you about performing at our winter showcase. Please call me. Another buzz. Another unknown number. My name is Catherine Chen. I teach at Riverside Conservatory. I'd like to discuss some opportunities with you if you're interested. Riverside Conservatory. Lisa's stomach flipped. That was where she'd gone to school. Where she'd spent the best and most painful 2 years of her life before everything fell apart. Lisa, you need to come back inside, Jenny said gently. People are waiting. And Tony's trying to handle everything, but he's getting overwhelmed. Lisa took a deep breath and nodded. She slipped her phone back into her apron pocket, though it kept buzzing against her hip like a trapped insect. Together they went back through the door. The restaurant was buzzing with energy. Several people were still there who'd finished eating ages ago, hanging around hoping to talk to her. The birthday couple was still at their table, dessert plates in front of them, clearly not in any hurry to leave. As soon as Lisa appeared, conversations quieted. People turned to look at her. She felt like an animal in a zoo on display, every movement watched and analyzed. Lisa, Tony called from behind the bar. Got someone here who wants to meet you. A man stood near the bar, mid-40s, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt. He had the look of someone comfortable in his own skin. The kind of person who'd spent years working in creative fields. He smiled when he saw her approach. Hi, he said, extending his hand. I'm David Park. I'm a music producer here in the city. I was having dinner with my daughter when you played. He gestured to a teenage girl sitting at the bar who waved shyly. That was something really special. I've been in this industry for 20 years and I know the real thing when I hear it. Lisa shook his hand mechanically. Thank you. That's very kind. I mean it, he said. Look, I don't want to pressure you, especially right now when you're clearly overwhelmed. But I'd love to talk to you sometime about your music. What you're doing now, what you want to be doing. There might be some opportunities that could interest you. He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. The card was simple, elegant. Just his name, phone number, and email. No flashy graphics or job titles. Somehow that made it feel more legitimate. I know this is a lot, he continued. Take your time. But if you're interested in exploring what else might be possible with your talent, give me a call. No obligations, just a conversation. Lisa took the card, her fingers numb. Okay, thank you. He smiled, collected his daughter, and they left together. Through the window, Lisa could see them talking animatedly as they walked to their car. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Lisa tried to focus on her tables, on doing her job, but people kept stopping her, complimenting her, asking questions, taking pictures with her. Someone asked for her autograph, which felt absurd. She was a waitress who'd played one song, not a celebrity. By the time the restaurant closed at 10, Lisa was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with being on her feet all day. It was an emotional exhaustion, the kind that settled deep in your bones. She helped Jenny and Tony clean up, wiping down tables in silence, while her phone continued its relentless buzzing in her apron. Tony kept glancing at her, clearly wanting to say something but not sure how to start. Finally, as Lisa was counting her tips for the night, he spoke up. You know, in 3 years, you never told me you could play like that. Lisa kept her eyes on the bills in her hands. It didn't seem relevant. Didn't seem relevant? Tony laughed, but not unkindly. Lisa, you've got a gift. A real gift. Why are you hiding it away, waiting tables? I'm not hiding anything, Lisa said, more defensively than she intended. This is my job. This is what I do. What happened tonight was it was a one-time thing. Was it, though? Tony asked. He leaned against the bar, crossing his arms. Because from where I was standing, it looked like you came alive at that piano. I've never seen you look like that. Happy, free, like you were exactly where you were supposed to be. Lisa's throat tightened. My mother needs me. The medical bills, the rent, the medications, this job pays for all of that. I can't just quit and chase some dream that might not work out. Who said anything about quitting? Tony said. But Lisa, there's got to be a middle ground here. You could play here on weekends. We could make it a regular thing. I'd pay you extra. People would come just to hear you. I don't know, Lisa said quietly. Just think about it, Tony said. That's all I'm asking. Lisa finished counting her tips, including several bills that were definitely too large for the orders they'd accompanied. Clearly influenced by her performance, and said goodnight. She walked out into the cool night air, her whole body aching with fatigue. Her phone had finally stopped buzzing quite so frantically, but when she checked it, she saw she had over 50 unread messages and notifications. The video had been shared thousands of times now. People were trying to figure out who she was, where the restaurant was located, whether she had any recorded music available. She started the walk home just 10 blocks through the quiet streets. Normally, this was her favorite part of the day, the peaceful silence, the city settling down, the transition from work mode back to herself. Tonight, though, her mind wouldn't settle. It kept circling back to those minutes at the piano. How natural it had felt. How right. How much she'd missed it without even letting herself fully acknowledge how much. When she got home, she found her mother still awake, sitting in the living room with the TV on low volume. You're late tonight, her mother said, looking up with concern. Everything okay? Lisa set down her purse and sank onto the couch next to her mother. Something happened tonight, Mom. Something I didn't plan on. And then, for the first time in 8 years, Lisa started talking about music. Really talking about it. About what she'd given up, what it had cost her, and what it might mean that she'd found her way back to a piano tonight. Her mother listened quietly, and when Lisa finished, she reached over and took her daughter's hand. You gave up a lot for me, her mother said softly. I've always known that, even though you never complained. But baby, I never wanted you to give up everything. I never wanted you to stop being who you are. I don't even know who I am anymore, Lisa admitted. Then maybe, her mother said, squeezing her hand. It's time to find out. Lisa didn't sleep much that night. She lay in bed scrolling through comments on the video, reading messages from strangers who said her music had moved them, made them cry, reminded them of something they'd lost or forgotten. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. By morning, the video had been viewed over 50,000 times. She made coffee and sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the business card David Park had given her. The cardstock was thick and expensive feeling between her fingers. She'd picked it up and put it down a dozen times already. Her mother shuffled into the kitchen, moving slower than usual. The arthritis was bad in the mornings. You should call him, her mother said, nodding at the card. I don't know what I'd even say. Start with hello, her mother said with a small smile. See where it goes from there. Lisa waited until a reasonable hour, 9 o'clock, and then, before she could talk herself out of it, she dialed the number. David answered on the second ring. This is David. Hi, this is Lisa, from Romano's restaurant. You gave me your card last night. Lisa, I'm so glad you called. His voice was warm, genuine. How are you holding up? I saw the videos going pretty viral. Yeah, it's a lot, Lisa admitted. I'm not really used to this kind of attention. I can imagine. Listen, I meant what I said last night. I'd love to sit down and talk with you about your music. No pressure, no commitment. Just a conversation about possibilities. Are you free sometime this week? They arranged to meet at a coffee shop on Wednesday afternoon, one of Lisa's days off. When she hung up, her hands were shaking again, but this time it felt different, less like fear and more like anticipation. The next few days were surreal. The video kept spreading. Local news stations picked up the story. Waitress's hidden talent goes viral. A reporter even came to Romano's trying to interview her. But Tony sent them away, protective as always. Lisa's phone didn't stop ringing. The community arts center called. 2 different wedding planners wanted to know if she was available for events. A church asked if she'd be interested in being their regular pianist. Someone from a local music school asked about teaching positions. She wrote down every offer, every opportunity, even though most of them felt impossible. How could she fit any of this into her life? She already worked 50 hours a week at the restaurant. Her mother needed her. The bills didn't stop coming, but she kept thinking about what her mother had said. about not giving up everything, about finding out who she was. Wednesday came and Lisa met David at the coffee shop. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. "I got you a latte," he said. "Hope that's okay. You seemed like a latte person." Lisa smiled despite her nervousness. "Good guess." They talked for over 2 hours. David asked about her training, her background, why she'd stopped playing. Lisa found herself opening up in a way she rarely did with strangers. There was something about him that felt safe, like he genuinely cared about her story and not just what he could get from her. "Here's what I'm thinking," David said, leaning forward. "You've got real talent, but you've been away from performance for a while. You need time to rebuild, to practice, to remember who you are as a musician. I work with a lot of artists who do session work, playing piano for recordings, backing tracks, that kind of thing. The pay is decent, the hours are flexible, and it would get you playing regularly again. Session work?" Lisa had never considered that. "It's not glamorous," David admitted. "You're not the star. But it's steady income. It's good experience, and it would let you keep your restaurant job until you're ready to make bigger changes. Plus, I know you have family obligations. This kind of work, you could do it around your schedule." It sounded almost too good to be true. "Why would you help me like this?" "You barely know me." David sat back, considering his answer. "Honestly? Because 25 years ago, someone took a chance on me when I was working in a warehouse and playing guitar on weekends. I'd probably still be there if he hadn't. When you see real talent, talent that deserves a shot, you help it along. That's how this works." Lisa felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been tight for 8 years. "Okay," she said. "Let's try it." The next month was chaos in the best possible way. Lisa started taking session work, just a few hours a week at first. She'd go into a small recording studio and play piano parts for indie artists, for commercial jingles, for podcast intro music. It wasn't the concert halls she'd once dreamed of, but it was music. Real paying music work. Tony made good on his offer too. Every Friday and Saturday night, Lisa played at Romano's for an hour during the dinner service. He put a small sign outside, "Live piano music Friday and Saturday evenings." The restaurant started filling up earlier on those nights, people coming specifically to hear her play. She reduced her waitressing shifts to 3 days a week. The money was tighter, but between the session work, the weekend performances, and her remaining restaurant shifts, she could still cover the bills. Her mother's health had a good stretch that month. Some days were harder than others, but there were moments when her mother seemed stronger, happier. She loved hearing about Lisa's sessions, about the music she was playing, about the people she was meeting. "You look different," her mother said one evening as they ate dinner together. Lighter somehow. Lisa realized it was true. The constant weight she'd been carrying, the grief for her lost dreams, the resentment she'd never let herself fully acknowledge, was gradually lifting. She was tired all the time, juggling multiple jobs and responsibilities, but it was a different kind of tired, a purposeful tired. 6 weeks after that night at Romano's, Lisa got a call from Catherine Chen, the professor from Riverside Conservatory who'd reached out early on. Lisa had been too overwhelmed to respond at the time, but Catherine had been patient. "We have a winter showcase coming up," Catherine said. "Alumni performances, current students, faculty. It's a big deal. Lots of community members attend. I'd love to have you perform. Just one piece, whatever you'd like. What do you say?" Lisa's first instinct was to say no. The conservatory was part of her old life, part of everything that had ended badly. Going back there felt like tempting fate. But then she thought about the composition she'd played that night at Romano's. Morning Light. She'd been working on it during her practice sessions, expanding it, refining it, turning it into something complete. "Okay," Lisa heard herself say. "I'll do it." The night of the showcase, Lisa stood backstage in the same concert hall where she'd performed as a student. Her mother was in the audience. Her first time out to an event in months, but she'd insisted on coming. Tony was there too, with Jenny, David Park, and his daughter. The elderly couple from Romano's who'd started everything with a simple birthday request. Lisa wore a simple black dress, her hands cold with nerves. She could hear the murmur of the crowd through the curtain, at least 200 people out there. When they called her name, she walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, the piano gleaming under the spots. She sat down at the bench, took a breath, and placed her hands on the keys. "This piece is called Morning Light," she said into the microphone. "I wrote it 8 years ago when I was a student here. I thought I'd never play it for anyone. But life has a way of surprising you." She began to play. The music flowed out of her, every note a piece of her journey. The bright beginning that spoke of young dreams and endless possibility. The darker middle section that acknowledged loss and sacrifice and difficult choices. And finally the resolution, not a return to the beginning but something new. Something that honored both where she'd been and where she was going. When the final notes faded, the applause was thunderous. Lisa opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. People were standing. Her mother was crying, smiling so wide it looked like her face might break. Tony was whooping loudly, completely unconcerned with concert hall etiquette. Lisa stood and bowed, and for the first time in 8 years, she felt like herself again. Not the person she'd been before. Not the struggling waitress trying to survive, but someone new. Someone who'd learned that the path forward isn't always straight, that sometimes you have to let go of one dream to find another, better version of it. 3 months later, Lisa stood in the same coffee shop where she'd first met with David, but this time she was meeting with a different kind of opportunity. A small music academy across town wanted her to join their faculty, teaching piano 3 days a week. The pay was good enough that she could finally leave the restaurant, though she'd promised Tony she'd still play on Friday nights. Some things were too special to give up. She'd also been invited to record an EP of her original compositions. Nothing major, just a small independent release, but it was hers. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Don't forget dinner tonight. I'm making your favorite." Lisa smiled and texted back a heart emoji. She thought about that night at Romano's. How a simple request to play Happy Birthday had cracked open a door she'd thought was sealed forever. How one moment of courage, or maybe just one moment of not being able to say no, had changed everything. Life wasn't perfect. Her mother still had hard days. Money was still tight sometimes. There were moments when Lisa missed the simplicity of her old routine, when all this possibility felt overwhelming. But she was playing music again. Really playing, and that made everything else worthwhile. Sometimes the second chance you've been waiting for doesn't look the way you expected. Sometimes it comes in a dusty restaurant corner, with an old, out-of-tune piano and a sweet elderly couple celebrating a birthday. Sometimes all it takes is being brave enough to sit down at the bench and remember who you used to be, so you can discover who you're meant to become.